My name is Ed Bernier. I'm the Assistant Dean of Daytime Career Services at Duke University, the Fuqua School of Business. That's a mouthful. And I focus on the daytime program. So my team focuses on the around 900 students per year across a 2-year program. All students that are coming to school full-time, presumably looking to do something different than they did before. So our team, we have a big team of around 12 coaches that focus on those 900 students to help them figure out what do they want to do next, how do they go get there, and once they get some of those offers, how they can get the most out of the process. We want to maximize what those offers looks like. But that's a little bit about me. I think compensation is absolutely something to think about, because when you look at the price tags of some of these MBA programs, they're pretty high. So I think a student would be remiss to not consider what some of the financial outcomes could be post-MBA, knowing that they're going to be paying a lot to go get the MBA. So I think it's completely fair. From Fuqua's perspective, I'm going to give you a little bit of a glimpse into the rearview mirror, and I'm talking specifically about the class of 2021, so those that graduated this past May. This is all public information, but happy to share some highlights on what those compensation numbers looked like. From a base salary perspective, our students on average made a little bit more than $140,000. Put on top of that an average signing bonus about $35,000. These are all US dollars. Add in relocation and some form of a target annual bonus. And when you look at total first year compensation for a graduating MBA student, you're talking close to $200,000. So this number gets really big really quickly, and clearly there's a lot of variation. We're probably going to talk about some of the drivers that drive some of that in a little bit, but the way this data is collected is much like many other schools. Our students, after they receive job offers, they enter that information into a database that we keep. So this is private, so it's not like we're sharing these individual numbers for different students between themselves or to anyone external, but students will enter the information. The Career Center will validate it. We'll make sure that it's right, they didn't make any mistakes. And we can do this because we're used to seeing what these salaries numbers are year over year. And then all of these numbers get aggregated and shared publicly with yourself, with many rankings publications. In our public employment report, we start to aggregate all those numbers together. But average base, about 140, average signing, about 35. Roll-in relocation annual bonus, you're talking about $200K all in your first year. This is average, as well as the people that are actually entering the offers are the actual students that got the offers. So companies don't share them with us, they share it with the students, who then share it with the database. The salary reporting, it can be a little bit of a game in that this is based on who reports. From a Duke perspective, we are a very high-touch career center, very high-touch, which means that we do a lot of interaction with our students, and what that ends up looking like in the back end is we're very happy to report that of those 900 students, we got pretty much all of them in that number. So there's actually a range that's permitted based on the MBA CSCA rules on what's allowed to be reported, and we're close to 100% on everything that we get. So we do that because for us, it's less about our goal to reach 100%, but more of we want to know what's going on with all of our students. So if there are a few students that withhold their information, honestly, there's really not that many, because even when it comes to entrepreneurship, there are ways to report what that's going to look like from a base salary versus equity perspective. So there's ways to report this. We're pretty close to reporting all of them, but I will say when you look at some other employment reports, that's not always the case. You have some schools that have like a close to 15% margin of people that they will never report on, but that's not what we have here at Duke. From the rankings perspective, it's a very apples to apples submission, in that the rankings all ask all of the different schools for the same variables, the same data points. So it's not like some schools are reporting mean, some are reporting median. It's not really how it works. We're all reporting the same thing, knowing that there's going to be a variable chunk of students that are no information included or not included in the number based on the Career Center not having that information, which is totally expected. I would say that so from when we see rankings, of course, we get really excited when we see Duke is doing really well in terms of highest salary. But the comment I'll make on that is that's more of a indicator of the access to opportunities that Duke students have, as well as historical choices by students. So to be very specific around that, many of our Duke students, or all of our Duke students, have access to specific roles and responsibilities at a very select group of companies that happen to pay a whole lot of money. So they have access to it. The other factor that's obviously very important is for us to report this salary, the student has to have accepted that. So another way to say it is, our students have access to the opportunities and they choose to go do them. So if a student was to choose to go and take an opportunity that doesn't pay as much, we're going to report on that as well. But that's just something you need to understand. It's a combination of both access as well as the students making that choice. So an obvious thing maybe is that maybe not every student is choosing to pursue the job that's paying the most money, right? So that's the assumption that's baked in some of these. And you have some schools where some students are more interested in going to some of these high financial services roles, and some schools where students are less interested in doing that. So that's always something to consider when students are looking at those rankings. My understanding of the inbound student journey is, as soon as student has decided that they're going to attend business school, they've gotten the acceptance, they've sent in their deposit and their check, that's the moment that students start to think about jobs. And I know that because when we work with our admitted students, way before they start, we are getting a lot of the questions about how do they start making sure they are ready to go? How can they get ahead in the process? How can they make sure that they're prepared for that case interview? So students are thinking about it way in advance, way in advance. It makes sense because some of the companies are starting to do some earlier and earlier recruiting as well. So the students want to be prepared. So that's the first part. In terms of how many get employed after graduation, there's a pretty, I think there's some standard stats out there. I believe that the two stats that people think about the most is who has an offer within 3 months versus 3 months of graduation, and who has accepted an offer 3 months from graduation. Fuqua, Duke MBA, so we are in 98.6-ish for the 3 months 3 months after graduation offer, and when it comes to accepted, we're 96%. Now, the one thing you need to know about that, which is and I'm happy about that, I think that's great. There's two big drivers here. One driver is the search of a student is dependent on what they want. So if a student is looking to work at a company that hires like clockwork MBAs every year, they're probably going to be getting the job earlier. Makes a lot of sense. If a student is looking at something very, very specific, and we have a lot of this at Fuqua, where they're looking at maybe startups, organizations that don't have an annual MBA hiring cycle, those jobs are going to be closer to just in time of when the company needs to hire a student. So long way of saying the company's timeline actually dictates what some of these percentages can look like. The other one that's going to sound super obvious, but I'll say it anyway, the actual graduation date of a school is going to dictate what this looks like as well. So Fuqua has an early graduation date, so that's going to push our numbers down. It's hard for me to say that 98 or 96% sound like they're down, but it's actually going to push Fuqua a little bit down versus some other schools that have later graduation dates, because as it turns out, the hiring cycle of a company is more dependent on company needs versus, I wonder when this graduation is going to happen for this MBA school, if that makes sense. Consulting has been hot for a long time. Not just right now, it's been hot for a long time. McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Deloitte, EY, Parthenon, all of the big hitters, those are hot industries, and it's hot for two reasons. One, they need people. They need people. The other one that people don't talk about so much is they lose people. That's a high burn industry. So when you have an industry that's constantly turning through folks, they're going to constantly need to bring more folks in, and they're growing. So they're growing, they need people, they pay very well. So these are like a lot of the things that work well for MBA students, and you're going to get this flood of students that are raising your hand saying, yes, please. So from a Fuqua perspective, I would say about a third of our class goes into consulting. Tech is not too far behind. And this is, it may sound obvious, but I'll say it anyway. Tech's been growing like crazy globally for a lot of different reasons. And I'm saying tech very broadly on top of hardware, software. Fintech starts thrown into the conversation. But this is the place where you see some really fun, sexy growth that historically, and I'm talking more like 10, 15 years ago, was not necessarily so open for MBA talent. And you know what I'm saying, because a lot of the places you'll see on, in media, or, famous tech, visionaries will talk about, yeah, you don't need a degree. But now they're hiring a whole bunch of the MBAs. I mean, I'm not saying, I told you so, but there's a reason why they're doing it. So tech is up there as well. I'd be remiss to say financial services isn't a big part of the equation, as well as healthcare. As it turns out, we're still in this global pandemic, and healthcare is still a topic that's going to be talked about for a very, very long time. And there's a lot of opportunity within healthcare. I mean, we're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar industry. So clearly there's opportunity there as well, and healthcare rounds out the next big ones. Those are the big hitters, I would say, for Duke. I mentioned some companies in consulting for tech. A lot of the usual suspects, Amazon, Apple. You're probably aware that we've got like the top 3 people at Apple, so that helps. Who knows how long Tim Cook's going to be there, but we'll see how that happens. Google, Intel, IBM, I mean, you name it from a tech perspective. And financial services, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley. I'm leaving out a whole bunch of banks here, but the access isn't the problem. It's not the problem. The thing that I talk to our students a lot about is how they make some of their choices to pursue those races, because these are all very competitive races. When I look at who is taking jobs and where they're taking jobs across the world, I would say that people accepting jobs outside the US probably represented historically 6, 7, 8% historically. When COVID started, I noticed that number to severely get smaller. So of the people that are accepting jobs outside the US, that 6, 7, 8 turned into 3, 4, 5. Okay? So math, that tells you that most of the people are accepting jobs within the United States, okay? Which includes international students. So the macro question that tends to be asked is like, well, does an international student have a chance to get a job in the US? Easy yes. It's been happening every year, and it's been actually happening at a higher rate for the past couple of years than it has for the last 10 years before. But then again, 93, 94% is a pretty high rate as well. And then it starts to beg the question of like, well, the people that are working outside the US, are those mostly international students? Is that a kid from Michigan that wants to go work in the Netherlands? I don't know, right? So it's a combination of both. But the answer is yes, there are opportunities for international students in the US. I mean, easy yes. Is there an additional barrier called needs to have visa sponsorship? Well, yes, certainly is. But this is a game that we've all played for a very long time. Many schools have STEM degrees, which enable some other opportunities for international students, but very much, yes, the dream is still alive for everybody, including international students. And what I tend to tell people is the limitation tends to be less about your visa that you're holding and more about how you can communicate that you're going to be great for that company. And that's the same thing I say to somebody who's from Ohio versus somebody that's from Mideast Asia. It's the same thing for me. Averages are combinations of highs and lows. Does that really pertain to me? Am I going to be able to go get that thing, or I'd have to settle for something else? What I tell our students, every single one of the opportunities that they're going after, they're all competitive. They're all competitive. Regardless of salary. High salary, competitive. Low, and it's hard to say that 120,000 is low, but low salary, also competitive, okay? So they're all very competitive. So what this turns into for us is some sort of conversation around, hey, getting into Duke was pretty hard. It was. You outcompeted a lot of other would-be MBAs all over the world to get the seat at Duke. So, okay, congratulations. But now the harder thing is going to start. We're going to work with you to help you figure out what are the areas that actually bring you a little joy. What's that thing that you actually like going to do at work? Hard to figure that out in a short period of time, but we can help people get some guesses on some areas that they want to pursue. And from there, we're going to work very closely with them to make sure they're successful in landing that thing with the place at any time, whether it's within business school or after they graduate. So for me, it's less about, am I going to be able to do these kinds of things? I have tons of examples of people that have come from all different backgrounds that have pivoted into all different roles. So for me, it's an old story. Everyone can do everything. It's just a matter of what do they want to do and are they willing to put in the work? Because if they're not willing to put in the work, then I'm guessing they probably don't want it. And hey, I'm okay with that. But let's help them figure out what are the areas that are going to cater to their strengths and how can we help them get there. We've been doing this with thousands of students over the years. And I get it, every year is more competitive, but this is the game that we play and this is why we love doing it. I'll tell you two things, and one of them admissions is going to be very angry with me about. But, let's be honest, a student can go to a library right now, get all of the books that they'll be learning at an MBA school, and they'd learn it on their own. That's free. Free. Return on investment, divide anything by zero, and it's infinity. Okay, so it's free to go to a library, but then that begs the question, is me going to a school just learning about the C's and P's of marketing? Is it just about learning CAPM of finance? Is it just learning about all of these different operational queuing theory questions that I can learn in a classroom? Every business school, at least I hope they should be teaching all these fundamental concepts of business. So when you get to the ROI question, you quickly get to this equation where you figure out amount of money I'm paying to go to expensive school, how much am I going to be making afterwards? And you end up getting yes, you're going to have some differentiation depending on the schools that you're looking at and what your scholarships look like, but you're going to start seeing a lot of parity. That's just what it looks like. So then the next question, which is more important, is, well, what are the differences here? Now, this is going to sound like a combination of some hard and soft things, so work with me here. You can only get one MBA in your life. Those are the rules. That's kind of how it works. So there's only one community that you're going to now become a part of. When you go spend your time with Duke alumni, Duke current students, Duke faculty and staff, is that a family do you want to be a part of? And I say that because this is a family that you're going to interact with for the rest of your life. So do you want to interact with a family that's very helpful, that's going to push you, that has people placed in many different leadership positions across the world? Is that valuable to you? Then maybe Duke could be a great option for you. Is this team-based environment something that doesn't jive with you? Are you more of a lone wolf and you don't like working with other people? Hey, I'm not going to hate on that, but maybe Duke is not going to be for you. So how do we tie that back to ROI? If we have just figured out that there's a many-way tie for, call it, access to opportunities and what this ROI is going to look like across a band of business schools that you're considering, you start going to the next ones, like, where do I want to be? Who's the family I want to be associated with? And I don't know, who am I proud to put letters on my chest on versus it's just a 2-year transactional experience in my life. And those are the things that I would start to point to. ROI question is easy. Hey, save your money, go to the library and just check out the books and learn on your own and do a lot of cold calls and hopefully they pick up. But the actual networking community that you're literally buying into is a powerful and valuable one. I don't love that, but that's what it is. So those are the things that when you get to some point of parity are going to start to be some of the decision makers that you look for when you're deciding on a business school. That's my opinion anyway.